Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just click the link in the show description to support now.
You're locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke loves wrestling.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hi, this is Earl Oliver from Sully's Vintage Wrestling.
This is Raj Giri with WrestlingInc.com.
This is Sean Reed, boxing writer and undercover low-key wrestling fan, and you're listening to Duke Loves Wrestling. Woo!
Welcome back to Duke Loves Wrestling, the show about pro wrestling and everything else. Hope everyone is doing well out there as usual. You know, we're in the thick of things with this summer. Oh, my God, this crazy heat wave that we had here in sunny Boston, Massachusetts. It's kind of broke a little bit. Now we're getting crazy rain. And I hear there are dust storms and all kinds of other things going on throughout the country. So I don't know what the heck's going on, folks, but just please, I ask all of you, be safe out there, be smart, wear your masks, right? Wear your masks. And so you can at least continue to join us here on Duke Loves Wrestling podcast every week. That's right. That's right. You know, there are some important things that are going on in pro wrestling, and I've been talking about it for the past 2 weeks. You know, we had an incredible conversation last week with Thunder Rosa and her husband, Brian Cervantes. You know, their Mission Pro Wrestling is really going to be doing some great things out there, and shout out to them and Robin Reed and what have you. Really big show last week, really big show. But I want to continue the discussion on this speaking out and on where do we go from here with so much dramatic change in the pro wrestling industry and in society in general over the past few months. So another friend of the show, and somebody, you know, if you've been a long-time listener, you've definitely heard this guy through the years. Really, really cool dude and hardworking indie wrestler, but more importantly, a really nice human being as well. He has some things to say, and he has a perspective that you may not have heard much from as we're going through this whole speaking out stuff. And he has a perspective on this COVID-19 stuff, which I think you know is very important for everybody to hear about. So without further ado, welcome back to the Duke Loves Wrestling podcast, my man, Brad Sanders. What's going on there, Sanders?
Oh, man, just living life right now, man, fighting every day.
You sure are. You sure are. And I just want to say officially, you know, in front of all of the Duke Loves Wrestling audience and on behalf of the Duke Loves Wrestling audience, I am so happy to hear your voice, and I'm so happy that you're still here with us, Brad.
And I really appreciate that, boss. We had a little minor scare, but you know, was able to get through it.
You're such a nice guy that you'll call it a minor scare, but there was nothing minor about it. You actually battled COVID-19. Yeah,
I did. I do. I guess it's part of my personality. I do kind of downplay things that happened to me a little bit, and it was, you know, it was a pretty big deal. It was pretty scary. It was very eye-opening for me because I was at first when COVID started, you know, making its rounds. I was kind of on the fence on how serious to take it, and after I got sick, I was like, well, I think it's time we take this pretty serious.
Brad, let me ask you, because first of all, it's a normal reaction to question things that don't make sense. And, you know, at this point, I think we all can admit that the information coming from our government and our experts and what have you, it's contradicted itself so many times over the past few months that it was hard to understand what to believe. And, you know, just when you think that it's one thing, then they come back and, you know, you don't have to wear masks, and that turned into you got to wear a mask, and it just all over the place. Tell me, if you can think of one or two things that most people may not know because they have not fought COVID-19 personally, what are one or two things that you would want the entire world to understand about COVID-19?
Well, that one is I see a lot of people kind of just saying, "Hey, it's just like the common cold. It's just like pneumonia," and that's coming from people who never had, never got COVID. And I have had the flu and I've had pneumonia multiple times in my life, even as an adult. And matter of fact, I had the flu back in, I think, January, and I ended up getting pneumonia around Thanksgiving, and those lasted maybe about a week or so, about a week and a half, and I was over it pretty quick. And I was still up and about, eating, cleaning. I was still living pretty normal, without any hesitation or any fear of waking up the next day. But when I got COVID in May, it was a sickness that I'd never encountered before. I've never hurt as much as I hurt from head to toe. It was very painful. Everything hurt. It was just like, I don't know how. It's really hard to explain because you've heard people say, I felt like someone beat me up. I've been in fights and I've been in wrestling and I've done a bunch of different stuff, and this really did feel like I have been beat up, just like a consistent, like I got jumped. Everything just hurt, and I couldn't taste anything. That made me not want to eat. I couldn't breathe. There was a few nights I legit thought I was going to die. I was, my fever was so up and down. There would be days where I would just like go stand in the shower with the hot water full blast, no cold water mixed in. And I would just stand there, and it still didn't feel like it was getting hot. The water was hot enough. I still felt like the water was too cold, and it's just was locked away in a room. I kept myself isolated, and it was just. Mentally, it messes you up because you have to be alone. You have to stay away from people. So you feel like I'm going to die all by myself and no one's here to take care of me or help me. And it's just overall, it was the worst sickness I've ever had in my life. Absolutely the worst. And then the second thing, I see people say, "Oh, I tested positive, but I have no symptoms." That means that, it must not be that serious. Well, people can either be asymptomatic with it and just, they'll have a positive test, but the symptoms may never hit for them. They just might be a carrier where, there's a carrier versus infected, where I was infected and, it really messed me up and I was sick for over a month. So don't downplay it just because you don't have symptoms. Still, you may pass it along to somebody that it could possibly, kill. And then the third thing is there was a group of people talking about, "Oh, I got it back. I must have got it back in December because I was sick for so long." And I've talked to some of those people that made those claims, and I was like, "Well, tell me what your symptoms were." And I was like, "Okay, were you still able to eat? Were you able to still move about your normal day?" And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Then you didn't have it, because when you have this, it shuts you down." So if you're sick if you claim you had COVID back in December or around Christmas or around Thanksgiving, but you were still able to go live a normal life and move and clean and operate, then you didn't have this. I'm sorry. I just don't. You just didn't, because when you get this, it legit puts you in the bed and you're not doing anything.
That it's so interesting to hear you admit all of this because, let's face it, you're a pro wrestler. You're a guy that has some great size on you. You are an MMA fighter as well. I don't think a lot of folks even realize that, but you're a legitimate bare knuckle and hand-to-hand combat guy,
Yeah.
But my point is you're not, there's nothing frail about you. You're what I would consider a pretty tough guy. So the fact that this sickness knocked you down the way that it did, that's a hell of a thing to have to admit. Let me ask you this, Brad. Since you've gotten to the point where you're no longer positive for COVID-19, are you feeling or experiencing any after effects? Because, there's a lot of information coming out that people who've had it, whether they were symptomatic or not, there might be issues with their liver or their kidneys or, heart issues. There's other things that are being discovered that are remnants of the battle with COVID-19. Have you had any issues that you didn't previously had before, or maybe something that you had before that's gotten worse?
I haven't noticed anything yet, but also haven't had any test with, to test my heart, my liver, or anything like that. I know after the worst of the symptoms started fading away, I started getting the COVID cough, and my lungs and my ribs would just hurt for the longest time. And there for a while, I still had a hard time catching my breath. So my lungs definitely for a while was weakened because they were very compromised while I was sick. And I unfortunately was one of the few that didn't get a breathing treatment or anything like that. I kind of toughed it out without any extra help. I've noticed, the only thing I really noticed about now is, my eating habits have changed. Like there's things that before I got sick, and I don't know if this is a thing, I just know this about myself. There's things that I used to like, but now, like when I got back because I couldn't taste anything for over a month. Now I'm just like, I don't want a lot of food. There's a lot of food out there that like I used to just love, and my mouth would water over. And now I'm just like, I don't want it. It don't even look appealing to me. It don't even looks like it tastes good. The smell don't smell good. My breathing, every once in a while, I feel like I'll just be like, man, why am I out of breath? I just took the trash out. But when it comes to like my internal organs, I haven't noticed anything yet, and I haven't considered going to getting checked yet. But I think I'll get checked if I start seeing anything like drastic change in my body or in the way I feel.
Well, again, I just, I really tip my hat to you, the fact that you were able to endure such a dangerous sickness and you lived to tell about it, because, I can speak personally here, and I'm not overstating this at all, Brad. I've stopped counting. Over 100 people I know have succumbed to this. And that's not a joke. And I realized that number because a loved one had passed away from it. And then as I was at the website for the funeral home, I started looking at the photos of folks who had passed and were having funerals. And I realized I could more accurately count the people I didn't know.
Wow.
And that was just one home. So then I looked at the other two more prominent homes other than that one. It was the same deal. So literally over 100 people in the greater Boston area who succumbed to this, I've known. So when I interact with people and they've come out on the other side of this thing, I mean, literally, I just say it again. I am so happy to hear your voice, because on a personal level, I understand. And I could barely wrap my head around the fact that the amount of loss that we've had over the past 5-6 months is just something that I don't know if we will ever be able to even process that. So you're still here, brother, and I'm so happy about that.
Well, I appreciate it, man.
I appreciate you. And, Brad, something that's come up in pro wrestling, speaking out. There was a hashtag where so many people in the wrestling industry have shared their personal stories of being taken advantage of, sexually harassed, sexually abused. And it's been an eye-opening experience, because men and women, non-binary, it doesn't matter. This is something that has affected, everybody. And it's such an important time to live in right now, where people can legitimately finally speak out and explain some of these, tragic and disgusting things that they've had to endure in life. And in the case of pro wrestling, for people in the wrestling industry who are guilty, they're being called out. So I know that you had shared online a personal story of your own.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to give you an open mic, man. If you want to share it with our audience here, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah. I'll pick and choose my words very carefully, just because, one, I don't remember the name, and some people say, well, if this happened to you, you would remember the name. And I'm just like, you know what? I was a kid, and trying to suppress things. I was able to successfully suppress a lot, but the overall memory and what had happened to me, it lingers, and it's caused me to have trust issues, and I think that's the biggest thing that it did to me. But I think everybody's situation is unique, and everybody is hurt differently. But for me, I was of middle school age, early middle school age. I was a big kid for my age back then. I've been 6'1" since the 7th grade. So up until the 7th grade, I hovered around the 6-foot mark. So I played every sport that any of my schools offered. And there was a year that I actually had a female basketball coach. And I remember after one of our practice sessions, I was in the locker room alone. And at that time, I was very self-conscious because I'd hit puberty around the 4th grade. So I had I was more developed than the other boys, and I had pubic hair, and I looked like a little mini man, I guess. I don't know, not real sure, but she took advantage of me multiple times without any type of intercourse. But and that happened for the entire basketball season that year. A lot of times, I didn't elaborate in the post as much, but there was times where I'd have to sit next to her on the bus on the ride home, and I'd get fondled on the rides home, and she would have me fondle her as well, and that was kind of where I learned what these things we have are and what we do with these things, and we eventually, that went on for that whole year, and I didn't know why it was happening. I didn't understand it. While I was there, she was also one of my teachers on top of being a basketball coach, and she would tell me, if you tell anybody, I'll fail you. If you fail, you got to repeat, your grade, all this different stuff. You won't get to play sports again, yada, yada, yada. And she really put this fear in me. And on top of that, my dad was a very religious man and a preacher, and he really hammered home into my head, but not much as on my brother and sister, but into my head that if you're out there having sex and all this stuff, I'll beat you up, or I'll whatever. He made it sound like if I was to slip up and have sex with anybody, I would die. So I was afraid to tell anybody, because I was afraid if I tell my friends, they're going to tell their parents, they're going to tell my parents, and then I'm just going to get in trouble. The whole thing made me feel like I would be the one to get in trouble. So when we moved, we moved during the summer, and we moved out of state. That saved me. But I noticed my relationships with, if I had girlfriends, they changed, because I was like, am I supposed to do this with girls now? Is this how you keep a girlfriend? Am I supposed to do stuff with them? And then I also didn't trust girls. I felt like, they were all out to hurt me or use me in a way, and that stuck with me real heavy for a long time. And I struggled. I didn't really like to date, and I lost my virginity, and pretty early after, pretty soon after we moved because I thought that was what I was supposed to do. And that was with someone older as well. And it just kind of messed me up because, even now when situations happen, it makes me think, well, I'm not good enough. What did I do wrong? Like, why am I the one in trouble? The person I was with could have been 100% wrong in the situation, but somehow I feel guilty, like it's my fault. And and on top of that, I don't trust like the way I should. I know I don't trust the way I should. Not to a point where I'm gonna go check their phones or go like spy on them and stuff, but to a point where I'm like, I don't know. I just don't trust them. I have a hard time trusting women to a point where I feel safe with them, and that's just something I'm constantly working through. I try not to let it hinder me, but it's hard. It's hard to talk about because it's a guy like, and this actually happened, and I had to block some people and delete some people that I thought were friends. When I shared my story, they were like, "Bro, you're so lucky. I don't know why you're ashamed of that." Yada yada yada. And I'm like, "Bro, like she was a pedophile. Like, why do we celebrate female teachers molesting and having sex and doing stuff with teenage boys, but if a man does it with a teenage girl, he's a pedophile, but she's a hero. And you're cool if it happens to you as a young man, but if it happens to a girl, she gets labeled as a hoochie or a hoe or whatever." I've never understood that, and I had to delete some people that I thought were friends because they tried to celebrate the fact that I was molested as a kid, all because it was a female that did so. And I think that's why it becomes. I think this happens more. I feel like this happens just as much to young boys as it does to girls. But boys they get celebrated if they do it. And so it was kind of hard to talk about because that was my biggest fear is this is going to be celebrated by people instead of taken seriously. And then I was kind of worried about the backlash from my family. And honestly, I know my family has seen the post. Not a single person in my family has reached out, asked questions, sent condolences or anything. So I guess that fear I had kind of just it didn't have a leg to stand on. But there were some people that reached out and they said some really nice things to me and thanked me for sharing, and I really appreciate those people. But I just I don't really know what else to say. It happened, and I'm 32 now, and I was a kid when it happened. I feel like for the most part, I'm over it, and it doesn't really affect my day to day like it did when I was a young boy, like when I was a teenager. And I know it still affected me in college, but I think as I've grown and then become a father and through some other stuff, I feel like it's a part of me, but it isn't me. It's a part of my story. It's just one that I never thought I'd share, but the speaking out movement kind of empowered me, seeing people tell their stories that were similar to mine. I was like, all right, maybe it's time I can actually share this because I've held on to this for 20 odd years. And from my perspective, not now, but I've always stood. But from my perspective, this is why it's so hard for people to speak out, because they're either guilted into silence, or the fear of God is put into them to stay silent, or they don't know what to say because is anybody going to believe me if I share it? And so I just encourage anybody that have a story that they need to get it off their chest to kind of set themselves free, get rid of some of that burden, then to do so, because it was a burden I didn't really know it was still kind of weighing on me, even though it wasn't affecting my day to day. But I feel better now that I've shared it. I really do. And yeah, that's about all I got right now.
Well, Brad, when you initially shared it, absolutely sent you a message thanking you for sharing that. And I believe I pointed out to you that you just might have saved a few lives, you know, and I truly believe that. I think that there's strength in when somebody, especially somebody like yourself, you're this big, badass wrestler, and you share a personal experience like that, it lets everybody know that it's okay to speak out and to speak up. Just how you were motivated from reading other people's stories. It was a positive domino effect. So I appreciate all of you for having this conversation, because it's the toughest conversation that you probably ever have in your life.
It's hard because you don't really know what to say. Like you can type it out, and I feel like I typed it out better than I was able to talk about it here, because you don't really know what to say, or how do I say it, or can I say it?
Brother, you've done it. You've done it. You have said it, and you did it perfectly. So I don't want you to walk away from the experience feeling anything other than the fact that you said it perfectly. You've communicated seriously, and I appreciate you for it. And I'll tell you another thing, Brad, and everybody listening. I think when you have somebody who is a survivor of trauma, it's so important to have people who are empathetic, people who have experiences and who have found a way to continue to grow and help others. You really need that in your locker room. You really need that in your business. You really need that in your social circles. So, Brad, I encourage everybody and anybody listening right now, whether they're in the wrestling business or outside or what have you, reach out to Brad and see if, there's a way to link up, because this guy is as empathetic as anyone you'll meet. He's a great guy. He has a hell of a story, but he's a hell of a hard worker on top of that. And again, when you have that type of energy in your locker room, in your business, what have you, it can be nothing but positive. And we need more Brad Sanders, and we need a lot less of some of these other folks who have been called out for some of the horrendous things that they've done and inflicted on others. So Brad, I'm going to give you an opportunity here. Please plug your social media. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, whether it be for wrestling or other business opportunities, or just want to touch base with you, please share your contact info.
For sure. And I appreciate the kind words, Duke. That absolutely means a lot, because, unfortunately, wrestling has a lot of, in my opinion may not mean much, but in my opinion, wrestling has a lot of mentality that's, I guess, either old school or just toxic, where, they want, a lot of locker rooms want a specific type guy to come in and be the locker room leader, but the guy isn't really much of a leader, like he's wrestled for 10 years, but he's got this bad attitude, and he's not really trying to help anybody or motivate anybody or watch their matches or give anything constructive back to the show or to the talent. I appreciate that, you say those things about me, because I'm only 4 years in. I think I'm roughly right at now about 450 matches, and that's something. I don't ever try to be the locker room leader. I just try to give back, and the only way to give back is you got to be able to, be open, and you got to be able to love the business more than you love yourself, and because wrestling is going to be here without us one day, and I'd like to be able to leave it in a positive way, and make sure when I leave that people say, man, that guy really contributed either to my career or to helping me become better, or helping a promotion or a show, and so I really appreciate that. But if I love doing podcasts, it's absolutely one of my most favorite things in the world to do. So I get really excited when someone asks me to be on. So if anybody else is listening to this and they know of a podcast, it don't have to be just wrestling. It can be legit any podcast. If you want to book me for a show, when things start opening back up safely, I am more than happy to travel just about anywhere. I'm waiting to get my passport when this COVID stuff ends. There's no sense in me even trying to get a passport right now. But I'm looking to branch out and just get all 50 states knocked out. I'm already down to 25 left, I think 26. So I'm ready to rumble, ready to go. If I gotta get a license, let me know. I don't care about that either. If you're a fan, I'll be more than happy to have you on my Twitter and Instagram. Right now, Facebook is I've got it locked down. I'm doing some cleaning out and filtering, so I'm not really taking any friend requests unless it's a business opportunity or a promoter. So I'm gonna give everybody my Instagram and my Twitter. I just restarted my Twitter because I couldn't get into my old one. So the Instagram, please add me on Instagram. It stays pretty up to date daily, and that is at Brad Sanders TX. That's at Brad Sanders TX. On Twitter, there's not much going on Twitter yet, but it's going to start growing and get a little better. It's that Sanders guy. THAT Sanders GUY. I also have a store at ProWrestlingTees.com. Just type in Mr. Discipline in the search bar. I've got 3 options right now. I've been selling pretty good, and I'd like to keep selling. So if you guys want to support me, and I got some pretty cool designs, I really appreciate that. And pay attention to my Instagram and to my Twitter, because every once in a while I may sell a piece of gear or a shirt or give away something every once in a while. I've used to try to stay interactive. Sometimes I give away signed pictures. So stay in contact with me, follow me, and we will, I really would like to see some of you down the road.
What an incredible conversation that was there with Brad Sanders. Thank you once again, Brad. Wow. A lot to unpack there. And a reminder, again, folks, when you share your story, when you speak up and speak out, there's no telling who you are going to reach, who you're going to touch, who you may help just from sharing your experiences and your story. So, again, thank you, Brad. Really appreciate you, brother. And any bookers, any fans out there, whomever, reach out to Brad. He's a good dude. Real good dude. Folks, it's something that I will continue to be very careful with as I report on this whole speaking out movement that we see, especially in pro wrestling. So much is continuing to develop in real time. You have a lot of wrestlers who have either retired, taken a step back from the industry, or have been let go. And eventually I'm going to do an entire episode where we just go over all of the changes from the different wrestling promotions. I can tell you off the top of my head, you look at a place like Impact Wrestling where Mike Elgin, he was let go, right? He was let go because there were some serious allegations against him. Jack Gallagher was let go from the WWE, right? I know that folks like Matt Riddle and Velveteen Dream, they're being looked into. Velveteen Dream just had a car accident the other day, by the way. Allegedly, he either ran a red light or a stop sign. I guess he was supposed to stop and he didn't. And he got into a bad wreck and he was in the hospital. He was recently released, though. Thank goodness for that. But he's got some serious allegations against him. Sexting minors and things of that nature. God only knows. Boy. Impact Wrestling, you have a guy like Jimmy Havoc, who's been accused of sexual assault and abuse and things of that nature. And, their response is to put him through training. He's getting some kind of help for that, whatever the hell that means. I don't know if you need a guy like that on your team, if that's the way he's conducted himself. Sammy Guevara did an interview a few years ago in which he made some very crazy comments. Talked about sexually assaulting Sasha Banks. because he was so attracted to her. That's what he wanted to do. That's not a joke. That's sick. He's been suspended. And whatever payment he was supposed to receive during his suspension is going to be donated to various charitable organizations and what have you. I'm telling you, man, there's a lot. I mean, Soraya Knight, who is Paige, from the WWE, Paige, that's her mom. She just announced she's going to retire from the industry because she's so upset about allegations of her condoning abuse and things of that nature. There are lists out there in which various people's names are on there, and it's interesting because you have folks who are being accused of sexual assault, but then you also have folks who are accused of being adulterers, and you have people who are accused of being racists, and they're all on the same list. So in that sense, I guess speaking out has evolved into calling out all of the negative people in the wrestling industry. I don't know how I feel about putting everybody on the same list because there's a lot of nuance, and I think that, there needs to be specialized lists so we understand what we're talking about at a first glance here. I look at somebody like Tessa Blanchard, who's been in the news recently. Her name is on a list with rapists and abusers and all this other stuff. And, what she's been accused of is spitting on Rosa Negra and calling her the N-word, which is unacceptable and disgraceful. But she shouldn't be on the list with all those other folks. That deserves its own list and its own examination and discussion, in my opinion, at least. And to stay on the Tessa Blanchard point for a moment here, there's talk that WWE has been in conversation with her. There's talk that folks over in AEW are, that's potentially a home for her because she was officially let go by Impact Wrestling, stripped of her title and forced out of the company, fired. I don't know. I think this thing with Rosa Negra, which happened about 4 years ago, I don't think this thing has been resolved yet, folks. At least for me as a fan, I don't think so. There were people who were there. I think Tony Storm was there and other folks who were there. I want to hear from everybody in explicit detail once and for all what happened. Because if Tessa Blanchard spit on Rosa Negra and called her the N-word, and I have no reason not to believe Rosa, by the way. Rosa Negra is not somebody who seeks problems or is making things up, which some of you have tried to insinuate. If Tessa Blanchard did that, she has no business in the wrestling industry, and I stand firm on that. And if she didn't do that, then, Rosa Negra has no business in the wrestling industry, and I'll stand firm on that too. But I have no reason to believe Rosa is making that up because who the hell would do that? And she didn't go out of her way to broadcast that to the world. Other people brought it up, and she had to speak on it and confirm it because she was concerned that she'd be blackballed if she were to speak out about a third-generation wrestler with a big name like Tessa Blanchard, Tully Blanchard's daughter, Magnum TA's stepdaughter, Joe Blanchard's granddaughter. She's got a Hall of Famers in her family. Rosa Negra was concerned that if she were to speak out about Tessa Blanchard, that could hurt her opportunity to grow in the wrestling industry and possibly get signed by major promotions. And let me tell you something. To date, there's a lot of truth to her concern because she hasn't been signed by any major promotion yet. And I challenge anybody to watch Rosa Negra's work and tell me she's not as good as folks that you see on TV right now. You can shoot me an email at DukeLovesWrestling@gmail.com, or you can Facebook or Twitter me, I dare you to look at Rosa Negra's work, especially over the past 5 years, and come back and tell me she doesn't deserve an opportunity to be on TV for some promotion. Impact, WWE, AEW, whatever. So there's some truth to her concern. Maybe some opportunities are not going her way because she spoke up and spoke out. I'm seeing a lot of folks tripping over themselves to, be careful about people who are being falsely accused. And yeah, look, I get that. And I'm concerned about that. Sure. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, but we're not talking about the court of law. People are giving their opinions on things based on the information that's being provided, right? I think some of you get that confused at times. There's a court of law and then there's a court of public opinion. And when it comes to being a consumer, a fan, somebody who's going to spend their time and therefore hard-earned money on something, whether there's enough to pursue an issue legally or not, when the facts are being brought out and you can't refute them, hey, maybe I'm not going to spend my money on you. I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to be watching any promotion that's employing Tessa Blanchard until I find out more information about what the hell is going on with that situation with Rosa Negra. It just won't happen. And I'll tell AEW and WWE right now, you are going to hurt your company if you bring her in without making sure that it is abundantly clear what happened between Tessa and Rosa Negra. That stuff needs to come out explicitly. We need to be clear what happened. This isn't a joke, folks. This is real life we're talking about here. Abuse and rape and all kinds of weird stuff, racism. It's just Jesus Christ. And we have to purge the business in all aspects of life of these evils. No two ways about it. We got to take our steps. We got to do the right thing. Even on a government level, we got to make sure that our laws are fashioned in a manner where we make it clear that the ideals of the Constitution, all men are created equal. That means men and women, by the way. We're all equal. We all deserve an opportunity to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? We've got to make sure that we're upholding these ideals because that's what America is supposed to be about. And for those of you who don't live in America, that's what America is supposed to be about. And I hope that wherever you live, that's what you're supposed to be about as well. Or are about, I should say. It is what you're supposed to be about. Nobody should be marginalized or mistreated when they're innocent and they've done nothing wrong and all this good stuff. And for those who have done something wrong, then, hey, they need to pay their debt to society for the wrongs that they've done. And only after they've paid those debts to society do we say, okay, well, you paid your debt to society. I don't have to ever like the fact that you've done what you've done, but now it's time to graduate. It's time to do something else. Right? If somebody's committed a crime and they've done their time and what have you, I'm not here to punish them again after that. It is what it is. If you're going around using racial slurs and doing some crazy stuff, you've taken sensitivity training, you've demonstrated that you understand what you did wrong and you understand why you can't do that. And you've literally, you can demonstrate clearly how you've grown, what you have done to contribute positively to combat racism, then we can have a conversation. That was the whole issue with Hulk Hogan. He hasn't demonstrated anything other than the fact that he's a selfish so-and-so, right? That's my opinion. And I based that off the fact that when he had an opportunity to speak to his peers in the WWE, he took that time to focus more on the fact that you could be recorded at any time, as opposed to focusing on the fact that he was as low as a human being can get when he identified people as being less than him based strictly on their race, right? I saw a tweet from Mickey James where she was going out of her way to express concern about people being falsely accused. Well, how do you know who's falsely accused, Mickey? Folks, don't break your back trying to defend somebody that you cannot speak for. I understand if this is like your immediate family and you're with them 24/7 or something like that, then sure, you might have a leg to stand on there. But outside of that, I don't care how much you like somebody. You don't know what they do and how they treat others, especially not in your presence. You assume, but you don't know. There are a lot of serial killers out there who had great friends and were considered, nice people. You got Catholic priests out there who are doing some of the most horrific things to children. They were considered holy, right? So don't give me that nonsense. Trying to go out of your way to even allude to people falsely accusing people. Prove it. Put a name on it. Who? And how do you know? Got to be careful out there, folks. And anyone who's listened to this show over the past 4 years, you know that I don't shy away from any topics. I'm going to hit it. I'm going to go right straight for it, man. Some folks have reached out to me about Rudy Boy Gonzalez, Texas Wrestling Academy. And here's somebody who legitimately is a top trainer, trained some of the biggest and brightest stars, someone who's been a friend of this show, been on the show numerous times, one of our more frequent guests. He's been called out. He's been accused of various things, mistreating his students and abuse and all these other things. And Rudy has put out a statement where he's owned some of these allegations against him, speaking inappropriate to certain students and what have you. He's also denied some allegations, saying he never has assaulted anyone or anything like that. And hey, we'll see whatever comes out in the wash. But I'm not going to run away from something like that. I'll lean right into it. I can't speak for anybody else. I can tell you I don't believe, based on what I know, that people would be capable of doing certain things, even somebody like Rudy, who's a friend, right? But I'm not going to sit here and say I know for sure what happened 20 years ago to God knows who or what. No, I'm not going to do that. He's got to figure that out. He's got to put out all the facts, and whomever's accusing him puts out the facts, and let's see what happens. That'll come out in the wash. And that goes for everybody, right? Matt Riddle, that goes for him too, right? Velveteen Dream, Jimmy Havoc, whomever. I'm telling you, folks, we are living in an important time in life where throughout the world, mistreatment is not accepted anymore. It's being called out, and it should be. And whomever is guilty, hey, this is your moment where karma has turned around and is going to hold you accountable. It's just the way it is. And whomever is innocent, you put out the facts, and karma will take care of you, hopefully, and make sure that if you are falsely accused of anything, that the truth will stand firm. That's where we're at. But I'm concerned with these wrestling promotions that are going to still go out of their way to employ people who clearly have some issues. I saw a long apology from Mike Quackenbush, which was interesting. And he's a legend. I mean, this guy, Jesus. Everyone's worked with Quack. But some serious allegations were thrown out there against him. He had to shut down his promotion. And a lot of folks are going to be shut down too as a result of it, because, a lot of good folks Solo Darling and these folks, they work with Quack in his promotion, what have you. But if this guy has been mistreating people, then he has no business operating a business, a pro wrestling business. And keep in mind, folks, this industry is built off of family entertainment. How the hell can you be around kids if you're out here abusing folks? Just doesn't work. And I'm not saying I know who did what or whatever. No, this isn't about anyone in particular, but it's about everybody. This is a checkup here, right? You better make sure your stuff's straight. And if it isn't, it's time for you to go. Get out of this business, because we're not going to support that. This old school mentality, don't tell and all. No, that's gone. We're done with that. There's no more of that going on. We're going to shut that down. And if you're training in the industry right now, or you're a fan and you're experiencing something from someone, hey, reach out to somebody. Let them know what the hell is going on. And let's identify who has no business operating, and let's get them shut down. It's time to clean it up. And I'm going to circle back here. WWE, I'm going to talk to you directly in particular. I'm telling you right now, I will spend every moment that I have free to call you out every single day if you're going to be employing abusers, harassers, racists, what have you. You better clean that company up, because you are the standard in the industry. And we have spent a lot of time and money and emotional capital on your company, building your company. Okay? You are nothing without the fans. And don't you ever forget that. We will shut you down if you don't clean it up. I want to thank my guest again, Brad Sanders, great guy. I want to thank you, listeners out there. We're wading into some heavy stuff, but we've always been this way. This is nothing new for this show. It's what we do, right? We talk about real life through the lens of pro wrestling. It's what we do. So, join me next week. I have another great guest. Till then, be kind to yourselves, be kind to others. That's right.
This is Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Wrestling.